I'm IMDAVESBUD, and this is my life story, a tall tale of hidden grow rooms, buried shipping containers, and building my own cannabis empire with the FBI one step behind me. Trap doors and trafficking, along with some strange tales. So this will be told by me with no script. We're here on my property. I own a psychedelic cactus nursery. So we'll be looking at these as views and podcast style. You don't actually have to watch. It will be completely uncorrelating sound and video. But if you do want to watch along, there'll be some gorgeous views, and you'll see some of my strange and weird, unique cacti while hearing my personal tale. Let's jump straight into it. I was born in Laguna Beach, California, and at the age of 9, I began raiding my mother's vegetable garden, filling up my Red Ryder wagon with produce, and walking down to the Sawdust Festival Art Fair, where I could sell the produce to exhibitors. Coming in through the exit, hidden away underneath the towel, I'd have my wagon of produce, and it gave me a little experience in entrepreneurship and some change in my pocket. Life was good. And at about the age of 11, I began smoking weed, and I was hired on at the Sawdust Art Festival to be a dream catcher salesman. my my life in the working world began. I soon realized that working as a dream catcher salesman wouldn't quite put enough funds in my pocket to really pay for the cannabis addiction that I had recently acquired. So at the age of 13, I applied at the city of Laguna Beach for a payroll job working in the transit department. I kept that job for about 3 years, and it gave me enough money to become an alcoholic. And I realized that I didn't have enough funds working for $4.15 an hour to pay for all of the 40s that I planned on consuming. It also wasn't that cool to be wearing a city employee uniform and a name tag while drinking at a party. So I started applying for new jobs and went back to the Sawdust Festival and was hired on as a ceramic instructor. And doing ceramics on the wheel became my new passion. And I spent most of my high school career in the ceramic studio, making pots, planters, bowls, vases, cups, you name it, I would make it. And I realized I could make bongs and pipes and all kinds of paraphernalia. So it became a true passion, and I was able to use the high school's friend group and people at the high school as my client source of income by selling cannabis. And I've gained great popularity selling cannabis, and everyone knew I was doing it. Even the teachers, principal, and soon the police department knew that they could find me in the district parking lot selling weed. So they came on down and they took me down. And I was super bummed to have to do a childish rehab. And I couldn't wait to just get my 90-day chip and get the heck out of there so I could resume my position as the high school drug dealer. Now, working at the Sawdust Festival was through 1996 until almost the 2000s, when I was able to graduate from high school with the Principal Award in Ceramics. I took that love and passion of ceramics, and I got a half kilo of cocaine, and I strapped it to my crotch, hopped on an airplane, and flew over to Hawaii. where the waves were big, the beers were cold, and the people were incredible. And this was before 9/11, so airport security was not being scrutinized. It was really easy to just hop on a plane and cruise on over. I love my life over there, but I realized I couldn't stay forever, and I flew on back over to California, and I began working as an interior plantscaper. I worked a maintenance route taking care of plants inside of office buildings, doctors' offices, lobbies, and homes, installing orchid arrangements and installing palm trees and watering plants and knowing how to take care of plants and how long they could go for a week without being watered and how much to give them and what kind of fertilizer things needed. And I was able to start taking on some side jobs. And my side jobs were exterior landscape. And my mother owns an interior plantscaping company, so I didn't want to step on her toes. So I primarily did exterior landscape and exterior landscaping. I was able to afford my own apartment in San Clemente, and I began a small succulent nursery where I would take any and all cuttings that I could from the succulents on my maintenance routes and such, and planting them into pots. I began growing cannabis inside of my San Clemente home, and I was able to get hired on by a quadriplegic man named Chuck and grew a garden for him, and he requested a thorn garden around the perimeter of his property. I later found out he planned on cultivating cannabis within his thorn garden, but being a quadriplegic, he couldn't do so himself. And he had all of the medical exemptions. I felt comfortable growing a huge cannabis garden with him. And me and him later became 50% partners. And I was able to really set in stone the fact that I wanted to grow cannabis as my entire career. And this was now in 2002, after the 9/11 occurred, so you couldn't as easily hop on a plane or do strange trafficking opportunities. And I began growing cannabis for other people besides Chuck, and using my plantscaping van that said plantscaping on the side of it, and using as my maintenance routes as kind of a cover, and going to multiple different houses where I had built cannabis grow rooms, and using secret trap doors, growing in garages, putting fake shelving units in front of doors to hide guest bedrooms and to grow cannabis inside of people's homes. And it was awesome. I built myself quite the name. I started cultivating tons of different strains. I was really known for Master Kush, and once Skywalker OG came around, that became a bread and butter. And these were back in the days when a pound was worth $4,000 to $5,000. So it was big money, buku bucks. And the harvests were small compared to the huge garden at my quadriplegic partner's house, but I could tell things were just getting a little shady around there. And he had the Travel Channel come and film a segment at his house, and I knew times were kind of numbered. The days were numbered, so to speak. So I kind of just left my partnership with Chuck being a little bit scared. I was young, I was naive, but I was also scared. And it took about a year before Chuck did, in fact, get busted by the FBI. I had built a grow room, an interior grow room, and this is now in 2004. And it was, really at the beginning of high-tech inline air-cooled grow rooms, and the hydro stores that we shopped at would kind of get watched. People would kind of sit in the parking lot, and it was just kind of sketchy back in those days. So I was really happy to have left that partnership when I did, before the FBI came and busted down his door. Turns out he decided to rewire the room that I had built so that he could steal the power instead of paying for power. So lesson to you guys out there, pay your power bill. Don't try to steal. It never pays off. Theft is never a good option. So moving along from there, I began cultivating tons and tons of clones, taking thousands of clones a week, creating tons of unique microclimate enclosed boxes where I could grow multiple cuttings and sell tons of strains. And I would drive from dispensary to dispensary. Most of them were illegal back then, and I would sell them my clones so they could grow their own cannabis. And that's when I came across a club called CannaHelp, and I began selling them thousands of clones. And I was really interested and curious, where the heck are you guys planting all of these? And it turned out their dispensary had over 14,000 square feet of grow space, but they just kept killing every round of clones that I would bring them. And so eventually they came to me and said, "Hey Dave, you're so dang good at growing these clones. Can we hire you to grow our cannabis in our club?" And so I redesigned their entire grow and began building this 14,000 square foot dispensary and cultivation lab. And this is in Palm Springs, California. And we became the first legal dispensary in Palm Springs, California, and the first legal cultivation. And we worked with the police department and the fire department and the city and the city planners to create some of the first plans on how to legally cultivate cannabis using state-of-the-art air-cooled lighting hoods, and to make everything fire safe with a fire sprinkler system and such. Now, this got to be so well known that in 2011, after multiple successful harvests and hitting my bonuses and earning my $100,000 a year salary, that High Times magazine came and did a full centerfold cover and 5-page article on the grow that I had built and created. I was really proud to be in High Times, and it was kind of a turning point for my career, and it got to be known that I could build a perfect grow room, and was hired on by multiple huge warehouse owners to start building their grow rooms. So I went from hidden grow rooms and hidden trap doors and secret labs, and from cultivating thousands and thousands of clones to being able to grow hundreds of thousands of plants for large warehouses and work out huge partnerships. Now, the money being earned would always end up going back into building something new. And, sometimes partnerships don't work out. Sometimes things don't plan out. But back in those days, when cannabis was about $3,600 a pound, and we're talking at about 2005 at this point, you could earn all of the money and investments you had made on building a grow room back in one single harvest. And these days it might take years to recoup your return investment, but back then it was literally 60 days to grow a crop, and it'd take about 6 months to build something, and you could get paid back for all of your investments in full. Now, coming from my high time centerfold spread and these huge warehouses, the only thing that seemed to be limiting me in my grows was the amount of light and electricity and space that I had or could use. So I decided to start leasing some property in the high desert where it seemed reasonable that I could grow cannabis under the biggest light in the world, the sun. And I started building outdoor gardens, huge outdoor gardens. And back in California laws, back then in 2000 and maybe 9 to 2000 and maybe 11, you could grow 99 plants. So growing 99 plants outdoors was the goal. The bigger the better. It was only the plant number that held you back. Everyone wanted to grow a pound of plant and get their 99 pounds. And I was out there with state-of-the-art growing techniques, making it bigger and better. And I began doing the same thing that I did with my interior grow rooms in the early days. And I began building farms for partners and taking 50% and building as many farms as I could. And in 2011, I took every last dollar that I had earned and was able to buy property. And on this property, I was able to grow my own crops with no partners, and it felt incredible. From there, I began kind of getting popular on the mountain, and anyone and everyone who was planning on purchasing a property to grow cannabis would come to me. A lot of middlemen and dealers and brokers would come and say, hey, I got money to invest. Where the heck should I buy a property so I can build a farm? And I'd build their farm for them, and we'd split the profits, and it would be, in most cases, really good. Everyone would be really stoked on everything that I grew, how much money we were able to pull in, and they would get some of their money back from purchasing a property, and I would be golden as well. And by 2015 or so, my buddies from Sasquatch came to me, and rosin had been invented, and rosin was the new thing, super cool to squish, and they wanted me to build out their new cannabis farm. And so we partnered up, and I built out the Sasquatch rosin facility and farm, and things were golden, things were gravy. And unfortunately, soon after that, my house burnt down unexpectedly, and I lost everything. And so I really had to buckle down, start working again for other people, and built as many farms as I could that year, and built out 4 farms and had 4 partnerships going at the same time. And when Croptober came, I had over 48 trimmers, and I was planning on getting back on the map. I had to get enough money to build a new house or to buy a new house or to do something. And I was able to find this unique and beautiful farm. I've been here for 10 years. And when I first moved in, where we're standing was just native plants. We can see in the background there just that native scrubs. And in the 1990s, a wildfire came through Laguna Beach where I lived, and it burnt my entire property. So I was really afraid of all of the weeds and native growth that was covering this hillside being so close to my home. So I began putting in trails and started removing the native plants and putting fire-safe succulents and as many cacti and things I could. And I was mimicking what my parents had done after their hillside had burned in 1993. So this hillside you're seeing here covered in cacti, and these trails that you're seeing along with that water reservoir were kind of initiated and the motivation behind them was fire safety and fire security. In 2018, I opened up a licensed and legal nursery for selling succulents. And I kind of redid what I was doing back in 2005, where I would reuse my cannabis soil and pots. And I started a small succulent nursery that I would sell to my landscape clients and make a bit of a side hustle income. And that was back in 2005 that I had my kind of first succulent nursery. And I would actually go around to my neighbors and ask to rent their parking spots or to rent parts of their lawn. And I'd set up irrigation and put out tons and tons of my succulents so that I could grow succulents using their water and their space. And I could use cuttings from the landscape that I had taken. All of the landscape routes and maintenance routes that I had, I would take those cuttings and plant them into pots. And that was really a time of popularity for succulents. Things were going good back then. So I figured I would mimic that in 2018 by starting a legal licensed nursery for succulents and pottery. And the name of my current business that I've had since 2018 is Plants in Pottery. And I use that license name for my website. And I sell cacti on my website. And back in 2005, I had ordered some peyote buttons and gotten real curious about that, and San Pedro cactus, and learned that there was different types of San Pedro cactus from Joan in Vista. And in 2005, I had a couple different San Pedro cactus that I planted on my property in San Clemente that I was renting. And so in 2018, when I started this company, I went back to that 2005 property and I took a bunch of cuttings from the landscape that I had originally planted. And back then, I knew of, PC as just San Pedro cactus, and then a couple other cultivars we called Terschekii a Saguaro Blonde, kind of like Sapporo Blonde, the beer. And once COVID came around in 2020, it was very apparent that cactus were a hit and that people loved cacti, and it was fire safe and drought tolerant and definitely suitable for what I had in mind on my property. And I just loved and embraced the cacti over the succulents, and found that not only selling them to my local landscapers and to people in my immediate area, but that I would be able to ship these beautiful plants all around the United States of America. So I began my website, and I began cutting awesome pieces of cacti and selling them on my website, and using social media like Reddit, Instagram, and even YouTube to sell my cacti. And when I was planting out my hillside here, I was constantly going to a few nearby nurseries, purchasing as much succulents and cacti as I could. And one of the nearby nurseries was owned by a man named Don, and he had taken on a huge collection of Trichocereus, all different types of San Pedro cactus, from a man named Ed Gay back in the 1980s. So Ed Gay had passed away in 1983, and Don became the new owner of some huge, enormous Trichocereus stands, and along with some smaller pieces of the Trichocereus burgessii monstrose, the penis cactus. And Don decided he was going to retire And in about 2019 or 2020, they came to me, Don and his wife, Beth, and they said, Dave, would you like to purchase our cactus collection? And gave me some prices and said they were going to retire and move and close down their shop and nursery. And I was ecstatic to be able to purchase some huge in-ground stands that were originally owned by Ed Gay back in the 1980s. And it took an entire summer of my life digging up some huge stands and relocating them here on my hillside on my property. Now, some of the older cacti around my property was here when I purchased it, and that was what kind of drew me to this exact property and made me appreciate and love this exact property, was just seeing some of these huge old cacti stands and knowing the value in so many succulent plants and how valuable the landscape was, and especially being a guy who can propagate and cultivate plants, seeing some of these older plants really made me want to purchase this place and motivated me to clean it up, fix it up, and continue ripping out entire hillsides of native plants and taking what cuttings I could and replanting them, and buying things from local nurseries and places nearby and putting in some pots and ceramics, which I love. And I've continued to plant as much cacti as I can all around the property as the mother plants for my business that I run today as a psychedelic cactus nursery. So what you're seeing here is a bit of older native plants that were here, and a lot of plants that I've planted myself over the last decade. I've been here for 10 years, and I've run and operated my nursery for about, since 2018. And I'm just really happy to have continued my plant passion and be able to continue growing. And I spent my entire cannabis savings to get this property, and I had kind of lost it all in a fire. And fire is also what has motivated me to remove the native plants around here and to plant in all of these gorgeous succulents and cacti. And my current career is a nursery owner, and my sole source of income is cacti, and I do the majority of my sales online through my website, and I do some of my sales through social media. And I have worked hard on this property, things in pots, but also a lot of stuff in ground. And hopefully one day I do hope to open this property up as a type of botanical garden that takes scheduled nursery tours, so to speak, or people that can come and check everything out. And people do want to see things grown in ground close to their native environment and see what things look like in their maturity as they grow older. More than cacti, I do have a lot of agaves and aloe veras and aloes, alobanesias. There's a lot of yuccas and nolinas. And there's a lot of endangered species that do live here natively, from snakes and birds and plants and lizards. And then there are a lot of things that I've planted myself that are thriving and doing well here. So I'm happy to show them and share them here on YouTube, and hopefully one day I can show them all in person. I do make my own fertilizers using Korean natural farming techniques in pots called ongis. And I add a lot of aloe veras and citrus, and I even just harvest and collect weeds and certain nettles that can be used to make plant additives. A lot of the stuff that's grown in ground has to be hand watered, Some of it is on irrigation, and some of the older things have really naturalized, and they situated themselves in the right areas, and they survive mainly off winter rains, and they do get some additional waters within the summertime months of drought. Living here in Southern California, the weather is always really nice. We do get some winter rain, and along with cacti, I do grow a lot of food crops, from citrus and lemons and mandarins and bananas, macadamia nuts and pomegranates, passion fruit, persimmons, tons of different stuff. And I also do grow a lot of stuff in pots. So I do plant cuttings into pots, but I never transplant one pot into another pot. Usually when things get a little too big, they get planted into the ground. And when they get too large, I'll take multiple cuttings off of them, because sometimes a pot is just, it's too big and unmanageable to make it into the ground as is. It has to be chopped up into pieces before I plant it in the ground. And that's just kind of the circle of life for cacti, getting calloused and then replanted and propagating into many, many more. There's always something to do around here. Sometimes roots from things can clog the drainage holes, just getting too big, and they have to get replanted. And sometimes things just grow too big and gnarly in their pot and have to get replanted. And sometimes things just get really big and they fall over, and that happens. That's all part of the circle of life and the work that I'm willing to take on as a nursery owner. And here on my YouTube channel, if you've watched this far, you could definitely like the video if you like it, and subscribe if you want to see more. This video was inspired by multiple people actually asking what my story is. It's obviously a little too long to say in a comment, so I try to respond to every single comment, but I also do try to make videos when people ask about, how to take cuttings, how to grow cacti from seed, and how I water, how I fertilize, how to graft cacti. I try to share as much educational info as I can, and I also try to show personal, what goes on with me, and I'll try to show more of that. I'll really just try to show more of anything that anyone asks about. For instance, some people had asked about these large Opuntia stands on my property, and they were here when I purchased the property. They are tall, they're about 20 feet tall, and they have some huge trunks and bases. And it's amazing how old some cacti can get and how big and massive they can get. And things like a paddle cactus that you wouldn't expect to get such a woody trunk and end up looking like an absolutely massive tree. And cacti continue to propagate, so it is something you can start a business or a nursery on. We can see the vast amount of cuttings that can be taken and that fall themselves naturally. It happens with cacti. Pieces break off, pieces fall over, and the life goes on. They're able to root themselves in. Sometimes they don't like where they fall and lie, and they don't make it, and sometimes they do. And it's just like us in life, sometimes your house burns down and there's nothing you can do about it, but maybe work and try to build a new house, or try to work hard enough to find a new house. And in life, you can either get knocked down and just lay there and not get back up, and eventually you're gonna rot, you're not gonna make it, or you might get a new motivation in life, and your life might get split up into a new life, and you might get transplanted somewhere else. And you got to just take what life hands you and love every minute of it, and live like today is your last. You never know if you're just gonna fall down. You can be beautiful and flowering one day, and you can be laying on the rocks the next. And even though, life hands you lemons, you could make some lemonade. But yeah, sometimes things break for me and fall over, and I could leave them as just an ugly, broken piece of cacti, or I could take that as an opportunity and graft something to that broken cacti and create something beautiful out of nothing. So if you've followed along on previous videos, you've maybe seen some things as smaller, younger grafts or smaller, younger cacti and seen them grow. So it's nice to watch the cacti grow. But if you subscribe to the channel and hang out, you can also watch me grow. And I hope this answered some questions of what's your life story. Kind of people just ask, how the heck did you get into plants? When did you start growing these cacti? And I've been into plants my whole life, and I've owned this property for about 10 years and run my business since 2018, and really pushed into trichocereus cacti since about COVID time, when I was able to purchase a vast amount of collection from the Ed and Betty Gay collection. So shout out and thank you to Dawn and his wife Beth for entrusting me with so many unique, huge specimens. And I'm just proud to have taken those large specimens and chopped them up and planted them into pots and created so many more and so much more life. And it goes on and continues. And my life story as it goes now is I plan to keep running my cacti nursery, and I grow food for my friends and family and just for my table at home. And I constantly plant new trees and new life, and I create new pathways and new structures. And the stairway that I'm walking on right now is one that I built myself, and I'm very proud of that. And the areas that we're walking through and aisles that are level, I dug those out myself and created those myself. And a lot of the strains and cultivars that you find for sale on my website are things that I grew from seed or things that I grafted myself. And it is raining here in Southern California. So anyone wondering why do you have cups on your cacti? There's actually fresh grafts underneath these, and that's just a way that I propagate and create more. So I take cacti, chop them up into small pieces, and create many more new pieces. So one small segment of the cacti can create so much more. And it's similar to cloning in cannabis. One small cutting clipped off can be rooted on its own. And much like fruit trees, the grafting of taking a fruit that might not be so tasty or so good but have a hardy rootstock and putting a really tasty, valuable tree on top of that. So in cacti, using certain rootstock that grows fast and does well, and grafting a small piece of something that may be more sought after and a bit more valuable. And in life, we can all kind of do that by using friends, family, and the support and love from others, and having it feed our own energies. And we can give back by becoming valuable ourselves and to grow into our own huge, unique specimens. And, just to give back to the world, and, growing as much food ourselves as we can, and growing as much organic plants, animal, and just growing an organic landscape, and giving back as much as we can through life in not just food and plants, but to each other as people. I hope everyone enjoyed this little walk around. If you were watching, feel free to comment and ask, what the heck is this? On minute 16, I saw this weird one in the center corner, and what kind of cacti was that? Or what kind of weird plant is that? And is that a euphorbia? And you can also ask on anything that I didn't get too in depth in. What the heck were you talking about? I was confused on what year or whatever. I'm happy to answer each and every comment, and I'm also more than happy to make any videos that you guys suggest. That's what I'm all about. So I just want to say cheers, Happy New Year. I hope everyone has a rad 2026.